Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name's Christina and today is Sunday, which means it's another Spooky Stories Sunday. Spooky Story Sunday is my mini series that I have on my channel right now for spooky season, where I do my makeup and I tell you guys a spooky story, whether that means ghosts, some spooky history, locations, or just urban legends. Anything that I've kind of been interested in at the given moment. And today's story is something that I fell down a rabbit hole and I can't get out. I did see that this was recommended in one of my past videos in a comment, and I had heard of this place before because not only has Supernatural, the TV show, mentioned this, a ton of paranormal investigators have visited this, and if you go to YouTube, there are a ton of videos on this location. And the location we're talking about today is the Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Kentucky. I'm really excited to get into this because it's fascinating to me because so many people claim that there's ghosts in this place, and we're going to talk about some of the ghosts today, and I'm going to do my makeup, and I have no idea what kind of makeup look I want to do today. We'll figure it out as we go, I guess. But before I jump into today's story, definitely make sure to hit that subscribe button because I do upload on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and Sundays for spooky season. So if you want to see more content from me, definitely hit that button. I am here every Sunday to tell you a spooky tale until Halloween at least. So definitely hit that button and let's get into this. I need a new chair so badly. This one feels like it's literally about to fall apart. So if I just fall down in the middle of filming this, don't be alarmed. It's not a ghost. I just have a really crappy chair. So as always, if you are interested in the makeup that I'm using, it will all be listed down in the description, but otherwise I will not be talking about it because I got a story to tell. Hang on, I gotta set the scene a little bit. Ooh, spooky. So originally the Waverly Hills Sanatorium was a tuberculosis hospital. It was built between 1908 to 1910, and its main function was to be a small hospital that would hold at most 50 patients. It was originally only going to be 2 stories, and by 1910, tuberculosis was pretty much widespread. But Kentucky did get hit really, really badly with tuberculosis. A majority of the people in Kentucky did contract it, and it was relatively deadly. Because of the tuberculosis epidemic, the numbers in the hospital obviously needed to increase. Therefore, the size of the hospital needed to increase. So in 1910, they decided to expand the entire building to allow for more people to fit inside it, which makes sense because lots of people were getting sick. So in 1924, tuberculosis is still an issue. In March of 1924, a massive undertaking to expand on the Waverly Hills Hospital began. And I mean, this building, you can see it in pictures in all of its glory. I'll be posting some for you. It's massive. It is so big. Just the sheer size of this alone is intimidating. If I saw this building and someone was like, you want to go in there at night? I'd be like, no, it's huge. I'd get lost. I don't want to go. Dark and spooky, even without knowing there's ghosts in there. But it ended up being, instead of a 2-story building, turned into a 4-story building that was going to be able to hold up to 400 patients. Well, that's a lot of people. By 1938, tuberculosis was the leading cause of death in Kentucky. So as you can imagine, the Waverly Hills Hospital was booming. And I hate saying that because as a hospital, you don't... you know what I mean. Initially, they thought the best treatment for tuberculosis was fresh air. So this phone call just scared the crap out of me. Go away, I'm busy. I'm trying to work here. Anyways, originally the plan for tuberculosis was you needed fresh air, lots of vitamin A, protein, and considerable bed rest. And that was the plan of attack as far as healing you and allowing you to get better. So a lot of Waverly Hills had these open air hallways and balconies where they would allow patients to go sit. Later on, they started doing what they called pneumothorax. It's like pneumonia. Pneumothorax. I can't pronounce this word. I'll put it up on the screen. They started doing that. Basically what they would do is they would collapse a lung, and that would allow for the lung to re-heal itself and allow you to actually be able to heal that way. And that had a higher success rate than the active rest and the brisk outside air. Basically, they said that allowed the treatment to speed up, and instead of spending 200 to 300 days sick, it's a long time to be sick. It would be shortened down to like 90. I could not imagine being sick for 300 days and just being told, just go outside. Eventually a drug was created in 1938, which really helped the healing process for tuberculosis, so eventually the numbers started to dwindle. So in 1950, it still had about 353 patients, and that dropped significantly by 1960. So the numbers were, you know, significantly diminishing. It's crazy to think that that was still mainly tuberculosis, because that's a long time, from like 1920 something to 1960. It was still just mainly focused on tuberculosis, but because of the development of drugs, a lot of people were recovering a lot better. So in 1962, it was actually closed as a tuberculosis hospital, and all of the remaining patients were transferred elsewhere, and they reopened it as a home for the elderly. They called it the Woodhaven Geriatric Center, and this is more sad to me than people getting tuberculosis almost, because this was a home for the elderly, and it is said that the people that lived there, the elderly, were not treated well. They were treated really, really poorly, and the conditions were not good at all. There was a lot of talk of like electroshock therapy, which at the time was very popular for any sort of treatments. It reminds me, have you guys seen Ratchet on Netflix? That show was so good, but for some reason that's what it makes me think of. Highly recommend that show if you haven't seen it. Very, very good, but not on topic. Let me get back on topic. It stayed a home for the elderly for a while, but in 1996, a nonprofit purchased it, and they attempted to turn it into like a religious area to build like the world's largest statue of Jesus Christ in it, but I guess they ran out of money or didn't have enough funding, and they ultimately walked away from the project. And in an attempt to recoup money, they wanted it torn down, which did not happen because obviously it is still standing. And I think in 2002, it was repurchased by the people who own it now, I'm pretty sure. And I'm pretty sure the people who own it now, they put on a new roof, they installed like sprinkler systems, and from what I can tell from their website is they do ghost tours, so that they've fully stepped into the role of this place is haunted, which is unlike our very first video in this series on the Dudleytown Curse, where the Dudleytown area is like, there's no ghost here, please just don't come here. They've seemed to fully embrace it, so take what you will from that. Some people embrace it, some people don't, but they do ghost tours, and from what I can see, you can sometimes spend the night here, which is interesting. So if you live near the Santorium and you want to have some spooks, go for it. And like I said, I fell down a rabbit hole. There's a ton of YouTube videos available of people like touring the place, so I will list some down below, including one of my favorite paranormal shows from back in the day, Paranormal Lockdown. They stayed there for 3 days. So if you want some spooks, I'll have all of those listed down below because super fascinating. But that's basically the okay history of the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. Let's get into more of the not so fun details of the area that people claim make it haunted. Like I mentioned, it was originally opened to be a tuberculosis treatment place, and I mentioned that eventually medicines were developed to better help people recover from tuberculosis, and that one of the treatments originally were your lung would be collapsed so it could better heal itself and you could recover more readily that way. A lot of the measures they did to do that procedure were less than ideal and not super safe to do on people either. So a lot of the procedures to do that were inserting red balloons into people's lungs and expanding them, and sometimes they failed, sometimes they caused more problems than just tuberculosis for these patients, and they were cruel at best. A lot of people, the oxygen would be stripped from their lungs doing this, and they would not survive these procedures. So the death rate was not only high from tuberculosis, but just also from the general unknowing of how to treat it, and people were basically guinea pigs at this point in the halls of the Santorium, which is not fun to think about when you think of, I'm sending my loved ones to the hospital to be treated and they're mistreated basically. And like I said, there were success stories obviously inside. People did recover, and eventually we do develop medicines and everything, so more people do end up recovering, and so a lot of people get to leave the halls and live their normal life, you know? Other people were not so lucky, however, and in one of the more haunted locations allegedly on the premises is the body shoot. And I'm not making that up. That's literally what they call it. They call it the body shoot. As if you couldn't think of a name to lessen the blow of what that is. No, it's a tunnel built underground to transfer bodies of the dead. Of course, my brain, to make this more comfortable, thinks of that Monty Python scene from the Black Plague, but it's not funny. It's not funny. I use humor to deal with difficult things sometimes, and I know it's not appropriate. So I'm not gonna say it, but unfortunately there aren't accurate numbers of how many did actually die in Waverly. They didn't have a great system for keeping track of who lived and who died, unfortunately. So the numbers that we have are probably not as accurate as they could be. But either way, lots of people had passed in the hallways, which a lot of people, and myself included, sometimes feel hospitals feel very heavy. And this could be why, because just the perception and the knowing that people have passed there. So maybe that could feed into what is happening in the hallways at the Santorium, is that people are aware that there's something called the body shoot and that patients that had passed were transported down there. And so just being in that area could make it feel more alive, so to speak. And so that's why people say there's a lot more activity in those areas. A lot of people, I think in the paranormal lockdown episode, they actually one of them did sleep in the body shoot tunnel and get some stuff, but again, it's all up to interpretation because it's TV, but that could be part of it. So the sanatorium wasn't called haunted until 2001, where the first ghost stories started appearing. Because the building was abandoned for so long, people would obviously go inside it to, thrill seek, and they started claiming they were hearing voices, they were hearing things slamming. One of the first claims was someone saw a small little boy and a leather ball in one of the hallways. Whether it was a tuberculosis patient or not, we're unsure, but it was just a little boy playing in the hallway. Another claim is someone saw a phantom hearse near the body chute. They looked, they saw a hearse, and then they looked again and it was gone, but they were sure that they saw a hearse by the body chute area loading what looked to be bodies. There's also claims of a woman with bleeding wrist that will scream and cry for help in the hallways if you are unfortunate enough to stumble across her. And then there's more famous ghosts. One of the ghosts is a man in the white coat who apparently hangs out in the kitchen or the prior kitchen area. The kitchen by no means is functional today. At least I don't imagine it is functional today, but they often say that they can smell what smells like baking bread, fresh baked bread. Not only that, despite the room being pretty much crestfallen at this point, people claim that they hear footsteps walking around the kitchen area when they visit. So they're smelling fresh baked bread and hearing footsteps walk around the kitchen area. And like I said, it's not a functional kitchen at all anymore. And probably one of the more controversial ghosts that apparently roams the hall of the Santorium is on the 5th floor, and people claim that there is a ghost of a nurse. People claim to hear her footsteps or hear her voice when they visit the 5th floor. She was in room 502, and she apparently was depressed and took her own life, and she is said to still linger there. She was only 29 at the time and unmarried but pregnant, and apparently that led her to take her own life, and no one knew for a long time, so they said that her body just was lingering in there before someone realized she had even passed. And that's why she haunts the place, because no one cared for her in life and no one cared for her in death either. So people frequently say they will hear her walking or hear her voice or just feel a presence in that room. A lot of people claim to be touched in that room. But from what I could find, there's no evidence that a nurse ever did pass away in the hospital. But again, they didn't keep great records, so we may never know if that's true or not. And not only that, it seems that the room has an effect on people. In 1932, it is said that in that exact same room, in the room 502, another nurse ended up jumping from the balcony window and passing away as well. At the time, no one really understood why she would have done this, and many speculated that she was actually pushed. So a lot of people think it may have been the ghost of the original nurse from the room 502 that actually pushed her to her death, and it wasn't her. Maybe the other nurse had been communicating with her and they were not getting along, but there was lots of rumors that the original nurse pushed the second nurse off of the balcony and that the second nurse wasn't the one responsible. And many people who visit that room claim that they, again, hear and see things there. So that is probably one of the more active places in the Santorium. There's also a rumor that there is a doctor that roams one of the rooms that was extra abusive basically with patients, and that when you go into a room it feels like you are having a heart attack because of the kind of electroshock therapies that he would do on people. And so a lot of people claim to have pain in their chest when they walk through a specific area. They can also feel what feels like someone pulling them into the room. But like with all of these stories, I always try to give it the benefit of the doubt that it's just perception of something happening, and that it's just you think it will happen, so you kind of bring it into fruition a little bit. But it does seem like a lot of people go into these halls and experience things. And the history of the Santorium is definitely bleak at best. It is such a sad story. It's so sad that so many people passed away in the early 1900s from a disease we didn't really understand. So I do feel for all of the families that lost family members at this time during this time period. And if their ghosts really do walk the halls, I hope one day they do find peace at least. But that, guys, is a brief story about the Waverly Hills Sanatorium and all of its ghostly inhabitants. Down in the description, I will have a link of all of my sources, as well as a ton of YouTube videos to go watch if you want to see people actually getting to explore the halls. Let me know down in the comments, do you think the Waverly Hills Sanatorium is haunted or not? And if you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up before you go. Also, make sure to hit that subscribe button, and hopefully that means I see all of you guys in my next video. Bye!